The room was alive with noise, laughter bouncing off the walls, conversations overlapping without care. People gathered with the casual confidence that comes when they believe nothing unexpected will happen. Muhammad Ali stood among them, calm and grounded, his presence steady without demanding attention. He wasn't performing, not seeking the spotlight, simply existing in the space as himself. Yet even in stillness, Ali carried weight. Some noticed him quietly, others pretended not to. Few understood how much discipline lived behind that calm exterior. Then a voice cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. It wasn't an accident, not a careless remark that slipped out. It was chosen, aimed, released with intention. The words carried disrespect, wrapped in confidence, meant to test boundaries. Heads turned instantly. A few people laughed nervously, unsure whether they were allowed to. Others waited, sensing something had just shifted. The energy in the room tightened in a way that couldn't be ignored. The insult lingered in the air longer than expected. It wasn't followed by apology or clarification. The speaker stood tall, almost proud, as if daring a response. Everyone knew who Muhammad Ali was. Everyone knew his reputation, his sharp tongue, his ability to command a room with words alone. That's what made the moment so charged. The insult wasn't just rude, it was a challenge, thrown openly in front of witnesses. Ali heard every word clearly. His ears didn't miss a syllable. His expression didn't change, but his awareness sharpened. He understood the nature of the moment immediately. This wasn't about disagreement or humor. This was about dominance, about trying to pull him into a reaction. Many people mistake moments like these as small, but Ali knew better. He knew that how you respond in public often teaches others how to treat you in private. A quiet expectancy spread across the room. Conversations faded. Someone shifted their weight. Another crossed their arms. Time slowed, stretching the space between the insult and whatever would come next. People began imagining Ali's response before it happened. A sharp comeback. A humiliating joke. Something loud enough to reclaim control. That's what they were used to seeing, and that's what they anticipated now. The man who spoke the insult stood firm, but his confidence was brittle. He had expected resistance, maybe even entertainment. What he didn't expect was uncertainty. His eyes flicked briefly around the room, checking reactions. He wanted approval, laughter, validation. Instead, he found waiting faces and an unanswered moment. The insult, once released, began to feel heavier than intended. Ali remained still. His body language didn't flare. His hands stayed relaxed. His breathing stayed even. To the untrained eye, it might have looked like hesitation. But Ali wasn't confused. He wasn't intimidated. He was present, fully aware of the choice in front of him. He understood that reacting would give the moment away. Silence, if held correctly, could take it back. The room felt different now, as if the air itself had thickened. People began to sense that this wasn't going the way they expected. The laughter that usually followed tension didn't arrive. The easy release never came. Instead, discomfort crept in quietly. Silence started doing its work, pressing on everyone equally, refusing to let anyone escape the moment. Some faces showed impatience, others showed curiosity. A few showed admiration, though they didn't yet understand why. Everyone was watching Ali now, not because he had moved, but because he hadn't. Stillness can draw more attention than motion when it's deliberate. In that stillness, Ali took control of the pace, slowing everything down to his rhythm. The insult no longer belonged to the man who spoke it. It sat in the center of the room, exposed, unanswered, awkward, without resistance. It began to look small. Words meant to dominate often shrink when they aren't met with fear or anger. Ali understood this truth deeply. He had learned it long before this moment. Through years of discipline and reflection, people started to realize something important was happening. This wasn't a delay, this was a decision. Ali wasn't preparing a response. He was choosing restraint, and restraint, in a world addicted to reaction, feels unsettling. It removes the familiar script. It forces everyone to sit with their own expectations and discomfort. The man who delivered the insult shifted again, less steady now. His posture tightened. He cleared his throat, unsure whether to double down or retreat. The power he thought he had gained began slipping through his fingers. Without a reaction, his words had nowhere to land. Without conflict, his moment of control dissolved. Ollie's silence wasn't empty. It was full of intention. In those seconds, he communicated more than words ever could. He showed that dignity doesn't rush, that confidence doesn't shout, that strength doesn't always announce itself. The room, whether it realized it or not, was receiving a lesson in real time. Some people felt uncomfortable because they recognized themselves in the insult. Others felt exposed because they realized how often they rely on noise to feel powerful. Ollie's stillness acted like a mirror, reflecting everyone's impulses back at them. It asked a quiet question. What do you do when your words don't move someone? The moment stretched further, and no one dared interrupt it. Interrupting would mean choosing a side, and no one felt confident enough to do that. Silence became shared. It connected everyone in the room, binding them to the same suspended second. Ollie held that second with ease, as if he had been trained for it his entire life. What made the moment unforgettable wasn't the insult itself. Insults are common. They happen every day. What made it powerful was the refusal to play the expected role. Ali denied the room its drama. He denied the insult its reward. In doing so, he shifted the balance of power without lifting a finger. People would later struggle to explain why that silence felt so heavy. Some would say it was intimidating. Others would say it was humbling. A few would say it was peaceful. The truth was simpler. It was controlled, and control, when exercised without force, unsettles those who rely on chaos. The insult that everyone heard was supposed to be the highlight of the moment. It was meant to spark something loud and memorable. Instead, it became the opening note of something deeper, something quieter, something that would linger far longer than any sharp reply ever could. Ollie still hadn't spoken, but the room was already changed. The expectations people walked in with no longer applied. The usual rules had been suspended. In that space between insult and response, a lesson was forming. One about restraint, self-mastery, and the kind of strength that doesn't need permission. And as the silence held, everyone sensed it. Whatever Ali did next, it wouldn't be ordinary. It wouldn't be predictable. The insult had failed to define the moment. Now the moment belonged entirely to him. The silence didn't arrive suddenly. It settled slowly and deliberately, like a weight lowering onto the room. At first, people assumed Ali was giving the moment time, perhaps choosing his words. But as seconds passed, that assumption collapsed. There was no preparation, no visible buildup, just stillness. The kind that makes people shift uncomfortably because it offers no escape. Every eye remained fixed on Ali, yet he gave nothing back. No expression, no posture change, no signal of irritation. His calm wasn't passive, it was intentional. The contrast between the insult and his composure felt almost jarring. The louder the insult had been, the quieter Ali became. That contrast began to unsettle people more than shouting ever could. Someone cleared their throat. Another person glanced at the floor. The room, once confident, now felt exposed. Silence has a way of revealing things. Words hide. In that quiet, people became aware of their own reactions, their expectations, their hunger for drama. Ali gave them none of it, and in doing so, he took control without effort. The man who delivered the insult started to feel the shift first. His confidence had relied on reaction. Without it, he stood alone with his words. The power he expected to gain never arrived. Instead, the silence turned his own voice against him. What once sounded bold now felt reckless. Ollie's breathing remained slow and steady. There was no tension in his shoulders, no tightness in his jaw. He looked like a man fully at peace with himself. That peace wasn't weakness, it was discipline. The kind built over years of restraint, reflection, and knowing exactly who you are when challenged. People often mistake silence for submission, but this silence carried no fear. It carried certainty. Ali didn't need to defend his worth because it wasn't under threat. That understanding radiated outward even though he never spoke it aloud. The room began to feel that difference instinctively. Time stretched again. Seconds felt longer than they were. The absence of response forced everyone to sit with the moment fully. No one could distract themselves with laughter or commentary. Silence stripped the scene bare. It left nothing but intention and awareness. The insult, now unsupported, began to collapse under its own weight. Words without reaction lose momentum quickly. They have nowhere to land. Ali allowed that natural collapse to happen. He didn't interfere. He didn't interrupt. He trusted the process. Some people felt irritation growing inside themselves. They wanted Ali to respond, to restore the familiar rhythm of conflict and resolution. His refusal denied them closure. That denial made them restless. Silence disrupts comfort because it refuses to perform. The room had shifted from anticipation to introspection. People weren't just watching Ali anymore. They were checking themselves. How would they react in his place? Could they remain that composed? Could they resist the urge to prove themselves? These unspoken questions hovered in the air. The man who insulted Ali shifted again, this time visibly uncomfortable. His stance softened. His certainty wavered without opposition. His aggression lost meaning. It wasn't met with fear or challenge. Only patience. That patience quietly dismantled him. Ali understood something most never learn. You don't always win by responding. Sometimes you win by refusing to step into the frame someone else has prepared for you. By staying silent, he rejected the rules of the confrontation entirely. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of intention, self-respect, and control. Ali wasn't suppressing emotion. He was mastering it. That distinction mattered. Suppression leaks out eventually. Mastery holds firm. The room could feel the difference, even if they couldn't explain it. People began to sense that they were witnessing something rare. Not a spectacle, not entertainment, but discipline in action. This wasn't about pride. It was about ownership of self. Ali owned his response by choosing none at all. As the silence continued, it became impossible to ignore its effect. It slowed the moment down, stripped away ego, and forced awareness. No one dared interrupt it. Doing so would feel intrusive, almost disrespectful. Ali had claimed the space without asking. The absence of anger felt louder than anger itself. Anger would have been predictable. Silence was not. That unpredictability created tension far deeper than shouting ever could. It rewrote the balance of the room in real time. Ali's stillness communicated something powerful. Not every challenge deserves your energy. Some challenges exist only to pull you down to their level. By refusing to engage, Ali stayed exactly where he belonged. The room no longer waited for a comeback. It waited for meaning. The silence had raised the stakes beyond words. Whatever came next would matter not because of volume, but because of intention. People would later struggle to describe why that silence stayed with them. Some would call it intimidating. Others would call it humbling. But the truth was simpler. It was controlled, and control, when displayed quietly, reshapes everything around it. By the time the silence reached its peak, the insult felt distant, almost irrelevant. It had lost its power. The moment now belonged entirely to Ali, and everyone knew it even before he spoke. The silence had already delivered its lesson. What followed would only confirm it. At first, some people mistook Ali's silence for hesitation. They assumed he was unsure, caught off guard, maybe even shaken. In a world that rewards quick reactions, stillness often looks like weakness. A few exchanged glances, quietly questioning whether this was the same man they thought they knew. Expectations began to crack. Silence to them felt like absence. Others felt disappointed. They came expecting spectacle, a sharp tongue, a dominant moment. They wanted entertainment more than understanding. When it didn't arrive, confusion set in. They thought Ali had lost something over the years. That time had softened him. That restraint had replaced fire. They were wrong. But misunderstanding comes easily when depth isn't familiar. Some believed Ali was choosing peace because he had no answer. That belief revealed more about them than him. People often project their limits onto others. They couldn't imagine restraint as a choice, so they labeled it as inability. They didn't recognize discipline when it stood right in front of them. Ali sensed this misunderstanding without reacting to it. He had lived long enough to recognize it instantly. He knew that people often misread calm as defeat and patience as fear. He also knew that correcting them immediately would cost him control, so he allowed the misunderstanding to exist. He didn't rush to clarify it. The room split quietly into opinions. Some thought he was rising above it, others thought he was shrinking from it. That divide deepened the tension. Everyone believed they understood what was happening, Yet no one actually did. Ali stood at the center of their assumptions, unmoved by any of them. What they failed to see was the work happening inside him. Silence wasn't emptiness. It was processing. He wasn't searching for words. He was weighing meaning. He wasn't deciding if to respond, but how, and more importantly, why. That internal discipline was invisible to those watching. Many people react first and think later. Ali reversed that order. He understood that once words are released, they can't be retrieved. He treated speech as something valuable, not disposable. That caution looked like weakness to impatient minds, but it was precision. Some faces showed subtle relief. They thought the tension was fading, that the moment had passed quietly. They didn't realize the silence was still working. Silence doesn't rush its outcome. It waits until the lesson is ready to land. Ali allowed that natural unfolding to continue. Others grew restless. They wanted closure. They wanted the scene to resolve itself in familiar ways. Silence denies resolution. It stretches uncertainty. It forces people to sit with discomfort rather than escape it. Ali let them sit with it. The man who insulted him began to feel that misunderstanding himself. He assumed Ali's quiet meant victory. That assumption emboldened him briefly, but it also made him careless. He didn't realize he was standing on unstable ground. Confidence built on misreading control collapses quickly. Ali had seen this pattern many times before. He knew when people think they've won too early, they stop guarding themselves. They expose their intentions. He waited not out of fear, but out of understanding. Timing mattered more than immediacy. People in the room began forming stories in their heads. Some would later say Ali looked defeated. Others would say he looked thoughtful. Memory bends easily when meaning isn't clear. That's why moments like this get misunderstood. Without words, people fill silence with their own narratives. Ali didn't correct those narratives. He let them exist. He wasn't there to manage perception. He was there to stay aligned with himself. That alignment mattered more than reputation, applause, or approval. It always had. The misunderstanding revealed how conditioned people are to noise. They trust volume more than substance. They believe strength must announce itself. Ali challenged that belief simply by standing still. That challenge went unnoticed by many, but it planted itself quietly. A few people felt uneasy without knowing why. Something about Ali's calm didn't match the story they were telling themselves. That mismatch created discomfort. Deep down, they sensed they were wrong, but they didn't yet know how. Ali understood that correction would come naturally if he waited. Truth doesn't need urgency. It needs space. Silence creates that space. He gave the moment exactly what it needed. Time. The misunderstanding reached its peak when people stopped expecting anything at all. That's when Ali knew the ground was set. Expectations had fallen away. Assumptions had loosened their grip. The room was no longer braced for spectacle. What no one realized was that this misunderstanding was part of the lesson. It exposed how easily people judge from the outside, how quickly they label restraint as weakness, how uncomfortable they become when power doesn't look the way they expect. Ali stood quietly within that misunderstanding, unbothered by it. He didn't need to be understood immediately. He trusted that clarity would come. It always does, eventually. The silence hadn't ended the moment. It had deepened it. And now, with expectations lowered and assumptions misplaced, the room was finally ready to see what real strength looked like. What came next would make that clear. Ali moved slowly, not out of hesitation, but with purpose. The shift was subtle, almost gentle, yet everyone noticed it immediately. When someone who has been still for so long finally moves, the movement carries weight. Conversations that had quietly restarted stopped again. The room leaned inward, sensing that the moment had reached its edge. Whatever came next would matter. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't straighten his posture to dominate the space. Instead, Ali turned his body slightly toward the man, calm and unthreatening. That choice alone disarmed the tension. It signaled that this would not be a battle of egos. It would be something else entirely. Ali's face softened before he spoke. Not in mockery, not in sarcasm. It was the expression of someone fully in control of himself. A small, quiet smile appeared. Not to humiliate, but to steady the moment. That smile confused people more than anger ever could. When he finally spoke, His voice was even and measured. There was no sharpness in it. No desire to win, no need to overpower. His words came slowly, chosen carefully, as if each one had been weighed before being released. The room strained to hear him. What he said wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't insult or expose. It simply revealed truth. The kind of truth that doesn't raise its voice because it doesn't need to. The words landed gently, but their impact was immediate. The man who had delivered the insult froze. His confidence drained as realization settled in. He hadn't been attacked. He hadn't been embarrassed. He had been understood, and that unsettled him far more. There was nothing to fight against. Lee didn't lecture. He didn't explain himself. He allowed the words to exist on their own. That restraint made them heavier. Without repetition or emphasis, they echoed naturally. Silence followed again, but this time it felt different. The room reacted without sound. Faces changed. Shoulders relaxed. A few people looked down, reflecting. Others stared at Ali with quiet respect. No one laughed. No one clapped. The moment didn't ask for applause. Ali had taken something chaotic and restored balance to it. Not by force, but by clarity. Not by dominance, but by composure. The tension that once felt sharp now felt resolved. The air softened. The man who insulted him couldn't respond. Not because he was silenced, but because there was nothing left to say. Any reply would have felt unnecessary, even small. Ali's calm had closed the space where conflict could continue. What stunned the room wasn't the content of Ali's words. It was the spirit behind them. People expected retaliation. They received restraint. They expected fire. They were given steadiness. That contrast reshaped how everyone understood the moment. Ali didn't linger. He didn't stand waiting for reaction or validation. He had said what needed to be said, no more and no less. That completeness signaled confidence. He didn't need the room's approval. His body language remained relaxed as he turned slightly away. Not in dismissal, but in closure. The moment was over because he decided it was. Cole had never left his hands. People sensed they had witnessed something rare. Not a victory, but a demonstration. Not a performance, but a principle in action. This wasn't about proving strength, it was about revealing it. The silence that followed felt lighter than before. It carried understanding instead of tension. The room exhaled collectively, as if released from something they hadn't known they were holding. Ali's words had done their work quietly. They didn't demand attention afterward. They settled into the room naturally, leaving behind clarity instead of conflict. No one rushed to fill the silence. It felt inappropriate to interrupt it. Moments like this don't ask to be rushed. They ask to be absorbed. Ali had turned an insult into reflection. He had shifted the focus away from ego and towards self-awareness. That shift couldn't be undone. The man who insulted him avoided eye contact. Now, not out of shame alone, but out of recognition. Something had changed between them, even if they never spoke again. Ali didn't look back to check reactions. He didn't need to. He trusted the moment to stand on its own. True authority doesn't monitor its impact. What stunned the room most wasn't what Ali did, but how little he needed to do to change everything. The lesson had been delivered, quietly and completely.